Hey everybody, it's been a couple weeks, but I just wanted to touch base. Um, I'm inside today because it's a little too late to be outside, and also that's why. I prefer filming outside, but I'm inside again today. And but you know what? I wanted to do a quick video about Enneagram 9. I've actually been thinking a lot about Enneagram 3, 6, and 9, and they're all on the same point system. And it was just an observation I had. I was talking recently with a type 9, and this is both my observations and what he said. And we were, when I read the Enneagram book, Risso's book, the Wisdom of the Enneagram, they mention in there that type 9, especially type 9 with a 1 wing, they said they don't come off as intellectuals. And that doesn't mean they're not intellectuals, it's that they don't come off that way. And so allow me to explain. So I have found that with type 9s, in my experiences, they tend to be so mellow a lot of the time that I'll say something and they'll be like, yeah. And it's like, I don't really know that they've heard me, or because they don't show any kind of emotion or passion about it. They're just sort of like flatline. They're like, yeah, okay. And I'll say it again, and I'll be like, did you hear me? And my mom is a type 9, and as an example, I'll say something like, okay, well, if you're gonna go out for a walk, make sure you just watch for the cats. She'll say something like, and I'll say, Mom, you're gonna watch for the cats, right? And I might say it again or something, and she goes, Jessica, I am a grown woman, I heard you. And she says this after a number of times. And so I just thought it was my mom just not listening to me. And then I had a couple other instances. Well, someone I know who's a 9 said that, I told him this experience, and he says, oh my God, I have this happen to me, that his mother will say to him several things, repeat herself. And he explained that he goes, in my head, I'll hear, it'll be like a little check. I'll be like, ding, okay, I heard you, but I don't necessarily express it outwardly, like to let you know. And she'll keep repeating herself. And he said to her, Mom, I love you, but if you repeat yourself one more time, I'm going to choke you. And I remember I've known other 9s in the past where I found myself kind of repeating stuff to them and thinking maybe they didn't hear me, or they're kind of like, and this is terrible because apparently they hear you, they just don't show emotion about it. Like they don't go, oh, right, they don't get fired up about it. So they tend to be kind of a little bit of a flat line. So when I was speaking with this coworker, this person I know, who told me this, I asked him, this could lead to being condescended to. And I explained that for me personally, like being condescended to is like, you're dead to me. Like this is one of the things that I don't forgive. Like, don't fucking condescend to me. I've had not that many women do it, but I've a lot of men do it. And it really, I just shut down. I'm like, nope, I'm done with you, no. And so I asked him how he handled feeling condescended to, and he said, yeah, it annoys him. I said, does it annoy you? Do you get angered by it, or do you just sort of like shrug it off, being that you're a 9 and you're like, whatever? And he says it does anger him. And I said, it's very interesting because there's this perception, I think, among some people who might think that certain 9s could be kind of like airy or ditzy, but they hear you. It's that they're saying that because they think they're perceiving the 9 doesn't hear, like they think that the 9 isn't clicking, but it is clicking. The 9 is just not showing that emotion. So I was just wondering if anyone else had experienced this. If you're a 9, I just kind of learned this, and I had this moment of like, oh God, had I been like a total jackass all this time, like to certain people, where I'm like repeating myself and thinking they don't hear me. And it's interesting. I mean, like I said, the book, the Enneagram book, said that 9s with 1 wings. It was speaking specifically about them. That they don't come off as intellectuals. It doesn't mean they're not intellectuals. It's that they don't project that the way a 5 would. I mean, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Carl Jung was a 9. So I'm not saying that's, but I mean, it's just a kind of interesting observation I had relative to perception versus really the reality. I think 9 sometimes can be so laid back that we don't think that they hear us, but they do. Or this person said, my mother used to think I had selective hearing. And I've known some 9s where I thought they were sort of having selective hearing. And I'm like, did you hear me? Does this register with you? And I can see how that could come off incredibly annoying if you're a type 9. Like, maybe you just bury the anger and you're like, damn it, stop treating me and talking to me like I'm an idiot. And if you're a 9, I just, would like to know, have you experienced this? And, I feel bad. This is not, I can only speak for myself. It was like, this was not my intention. And I think that's really unfair. It just shows what people can process things differently, that just because a 9 reacts kind of complacently does not mean they're not affected by it, doesn't mean they're not hearing you. It's just they're processing it differently, as opposed to other types that are maybe more assertive, or a type 5 or type 4 even, who gets an emotional reaction. And let's see, what else did I have to say? Oh, it was funny, so this individual was telling me he was moving in somewhere, and that the place he was moving into was a mess. And I joked with him. I said, so did you handle it in your 9 way? And he goes, I said, did you get angry like a 9? And he said, I did. You want to know what I did? Absolutely nothing. I cleaned it myself. And I was like, oh. But also, another observation I've had, and I've been reading up on the book, and I think this is going to have to be a separate video, is how 9s, specifically certain, I think sexual 9s, or they tend to, not just sexual 9s, but I have known some 9s, well, this is an unhealthy trait, where they tend to merge with more assertive personalities. And I'm going to have to do eventually another video on some unhealthy habits. I know I did one before and I had to cut it short, but and I'm not trying to rip on the 9. I actually do these videos as Enneagram videos as they come to me when I get observations, and there's really no order to it. But going back to the condescension, I have to say, for me, that is one of the most egregious things that someone can do. And it just really hits me very hard, because I feel like, as someone who's a writer, I feel like I've been kind of, it's just this kind of condescending attitude that, women can't be taken seriously as intellectuals, or that, that if I've written a number of novels, a lot of novels from male points of view, a lot of them that I haven't released, but some female points of view, and the perception is that it's going to be sort of schmaltzy or something, and that really irritates me, because yes, while that has been prevalent in the publishing industry, it's not the case with me. I'm an individual, and I remember when I was sending around my books, I would get so irritated, it was kind of getting typed, and I'd be like, one of the things I'd say, and this is before I knew the Enneagram, was, I am not one of many. And the anger, like it's almost like my sexual variant was like popping out or whatever. And I'm just used to really irritate me because I was feeling like this misunderstanding and this misunderstood. I'm like, why is it so hard for you to see this? And so for me, there's, I think a lot of my decisions in life came down to needing to kind of prove my worth. And while I'm a creative person, I'm a writer, and but I remember, so I majored in the sciences, and I have a job where I work in that field, and I remember thinking partially while the reason I did it, yes, I enjoyed what I did in some sense, and there's more to say about that, but was like, oh, maybe if I have this, then they won't condescend to me. And it was sort of like trying to prove worth, so my selection of that field came down to both, a 5-wing where I could be more to myself and thinking, but also not that I'm doing research or anything like that. That doesn't interest me, but my 3-wing and proving worth externally, and how much of that played into my own type as a type 4, which I just thought I would point that out, that this observation I had about the 9 and the repetition, and sometimes the 9 will say, I've heard multiple times, I heard you the first time, and after you tell them like number 5, they finally like boil up and they're like, I've heard you the first time. And I'm like, well, why didn't you say anything? And so I kind of had that revelation and learned that, but also at the same time, for our other types that are, if you're not a 9, sometimes we other types, especially me as a 4, I have a reaction, and it's like, well, what do you think about that? But one last point I have is that I noticed for me, sometimes I have had people who have repeated what they said or kind of questioned, like they weren't sure if I heard them. And it wasn't because of the type 9-ness, but I have that 5-wing that has a detachment. And so I'd be like, okay. And I'd be thinking in my head, okay, I make a mental note, and they would just assume maybe I didn't hear them or something. It's just kind of the same thing, but it was for a different reason. And I sometimes wonder, is so much of my seemingly laid backness in my day-to-day life, is that more due to just really a detachment? It's my 5-wing, and I'm just like, whatever, can't change it. I guess I just gotta suffer through it. Whatever, I'm not gonna let it upset me. And all I gotta say is thank God for that 5-wing, because I think I'd be like, oh, going nuts. But anyway, so I just had that observation. And if you'd like to visit my Amazon page, I recently released a 3-volume set of my Selfhood trilogy that's available for purchase. And I did a couple videos recently on about the volume 2. And these, what I'm working on in the interim is not just releasing old works. I haven't released anything written past 2009 at this point. I just have it on reserve. But I have to go back and polish up old stuff coupled with starting a new project. And right now I'm feeling that kind of antsiness. I need to start working on the creative side again. So I'll be doing these videos, as they come to me. And but also, yeah, I just gonna move forward in that with regards to my next creative project. So that's all about all I have right now. So I thank you for listening, and any comments, let me know, and give me your thoughts. So I hope you have a good evening. Have a good night.